folks. This is Dr. Emily Scherning. I'm here to present the June Community Resilience Award, and I think this is a project you're going to find important. In May, we gave out the first of these awards to Dustin for his pioneering work on generating original visualizations for our channel. In this video, on our wet bulb risk tool, AR is a small channel, so seeing a video get like 9,000 views, for us, that's cool. And for a visualization expert who never gave something like this to the public to see his work, this tool he crafted get thousands and thousands of direct interactions. That's also been really cool for us. People, we all want to see our work have impact. And the work we're recognizing today, many people don't know how to see it. I want to help you learn to see it, to give you eyes to see it. We've got Amber Lightfeather with us today. She's the recipient of this month's award, representing her community's work on restoring the Manoomin Lifeway. Amber Lightfeather holds a master's in public health. She's an advocate for Indigenous people's health issues, which you should know, health issues across many factors. That's an area where Indigenous people face enormous and ongoing injustice. We know that the contemporary diet is not great for any humans, but there's strong evidence that the modern American diet is particularly injurious to the people of the tribal nations. Wild rice is a cultural keystone food of the Anishinaabe people. And what we're talking about here today, we're talking about the practical work of putting in seed. But when we talk about wild rice, it's important to know we're not just talking about food, we're not just talking about diet and health and human impacts, we're talking about Lifeway. Amber, thank you for joining me. So, Amber, when we think about wild rice, many of us think of it as a food first, human food. But when you restore these rice beds, I know it's not just to make food for people. Can you teach us more about wild rice, about Manoomin's relationship with other beings?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, Manoomin does nourish the people. It is a cultural food. It was given to us by the Creator. And it's also a food that many other species, like almost all of migrating birds that go through this area, they stop and they eat at those rice beds. There's like 37 species of birds that depend on that while they're migrating. And then there's many waterfowl that depend on it whenever they're breeding and whenever they're just living, just living their life. They need that. There's multiple fish species that depend on wild rice, not only for food, but it's cover for them. It's where they can lay their eggs. It's their home. Species like muskrat and non-aquatic species like moose and deer and other species you wouldn't even think of also depend on wild rice beds.
So it's really central to a whole ecosystem, it
It is
sounds like.
definitely central to a whole ecosystem.
That's really cool. And I think many of us are aware that most of your migrating birds are very threatened, right? So this work your community is doing, it's supporting populations that are under a lot of pressure.
Yes.
That's really cool. And, talking about the people, I want to get more into what you say about the relationship between the Anishinaabe people and Manoomin. We hear that from the stories, you read that Anishinaabe people migrated to the Great Lakes region, connected with Manoomin. And I hear and I read that that was done to preserve their lifeway, the Anishinaabe lifeway. Could you tell more about what values are central to that and how that lifeway connects with Manoomin in such a central way?
Yeah. So centuries ago, there was a prophecy that I've heard it a couple different ways, but the most known one is that there was a prophecy that said that the Anishinaabe people needed to go west to where the food grows on water. And so the Anishinaabe migrated to several different points, and one of their last stopping points was the St. Louis River estuary in Duluth. Actually, that was one of their stopping points. And it used to be abundant with wild rice there, and currently we're restoring the wild rice beds there. There hasn't been wild rice there for a while, but we have some stocks that the geese keep eating. But in order to hand harvest it and to really take care of it, it takes a lot of work. You can't just go out there and just, take a combine to it or anything. It's very, very delicate. You have to have the right kind of waters. You have to take care of those waters, and it's just one of those grains where it takes the whole community to really, really harvest it and be able to eat it. And
Well, like, as I'm trying to come in on a Lifeway understanding, are these kind of reflections of the values, that life should be community involved, that life involves a lot of caregiving, not just to people, but to lands, but to waters.
yeah, it's all connected. And I remember my uncle Gene Goodsky, he was talking about um, when they used to really have a lot of wild rice, and they still were really connected to the culture, and they're trying to bring this all back. Like the first ricing, whenever people would go out, they would have a big ceremony, and there would be a big feast, and everybody in the community, hundreds of people would come to the first ricing, and there would be 3 medicine men there, and everybody would be celebrating, and everybody would be talking about rice stories. And you only rice for so many hours during the day, because at night, that's when the spirits get to rice. So everybody gets to get a part of that rice.
I think that is really cool to think about the abundance that was in those waters. And we think about it now, like we think about it as a shipping waters, right? Around Duluth.
Mm-hmm.
But they could be waters that are directly providing what life needs for people, for all kinds of beings. And the work your community is doing to restore that and to lift up that potential for these areas to return to their abundance, I think is really beautiful. And, thinking about indigenous food plants, I feel like even this little conversation with you, people who are listening, they can think about it as beyond a crop, you know? I think many people have this misconception, though, that indigenous food plants, you kind of just walk around and pick them and eat them. And I know Manoomin is not like that. I know you've talked a little bit about like this celebration and the process, but can you tell us more about what gets Manoomin from this delicate plant to the bowl?
Oh, it's complex, but I'll try my best. Um, so you have to have a certain size boat. You're not allowed to have a boat that's too big so that you over rice, because you have to leave some, because it doesn't all ripen at the same time. So you take your knocker and you hit it nice and light, and you knock it into your boat, and you just keep going. You don't even have an oar. You have some, since it's in shallow water, it's in like 3 feet of water. You have like a stick that you use to pull yourself along the bottom, and it has like 2 prongs on it so that it doesn't disturb the bottom. You don't want to mess up the bottom, because that's not good for the rice. It's not good for the animals that are in there, the fish, and if there's amphibians under there, you don't want to kill those things. You just want to move through the water nice and easy. So you're knocking it into the boat, and this is a several hour process. It isn't like you go out there and it takes you 5 minutes. It takes you a very long time, and you're very careful about it. Whenever you get back, you might have 200 pounds of rice, and you lay it all out on a tarp. You let it dry, and after it dries, you get a kettle, and you put a little bit at a time in this kettle. You make a fire under it, and you stir it with a boat oar or something like that, and you wait until it browns up a little bit. You take it over and you put it in a bucket. You put on some moccasins, and you dance on it. Some people call it jigging, some people call it some other things, but you essentially nice and easily dance on it. You get those chaffs to come off, and then you put it in a basket, like a flat birch bark basket, and you winnow it in the wind, and it'll blow those chaffs off, and then it's ready to cook. It's so good. Oh my gosh. Me and my son did that last year. It was so good. I just can't even describe. And I was reading a thing that said the way that you process it that way, it can be preserved, like basically stay good for 100 years. It doesn't go bad.
a very high protein grain to be as stable as it is. The
Yeah,
nutritional profile of Manoomin is wonderful, and the flavor of the food, I agree, it's a wonderful food. It is a food
it's
like a
my
gift.
it's my favorite food on earth. I mean, it's an amazing food.
Same here. I mean, you're in the heart of Manoomin territory. In Iowa, I'm on the extreme southern edge and vanishing edge because unless you have exquisite water, you don't have Manoomin.
Hmm.
If you use that for water quality monitoring, you know right away if water is good or not, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like a canary in a coal mine for waters. If the waters aren't sustaining wild rice that used to sustain it, they aren't clean.
Well, you can see that I'm ready to like go on a rant, Amber. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and be more quiet, but I want to ask you because I think that a lot of us feel like we're living a life way that's not working. We know that we're in overshoot. We know a lot of our daily activities aren't neutral to the earth. Like even going to get groceries, that can be a not carbon neutral activity for most of us. I think a lot of us want to get on a better path where we could do more good than harm. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, about how we could get on the right path.
Well, things like hand harvesting wild rice and just hand processing it, that is pretty carbon neutral. You're using your own body for almost all of what you're doing. The only thing that wouldn't be carbon neutral is just using some wood to burn underneath the kettle. And that's nominal compared to, just driving your car across the city. Um, a lot of indigenous lifeways are very carbon neutral. The only time they burned anything was to like process wild rice or to cook and then to stay warm in the winter. Otherwise, nothing was nothing was burned. There was no carbon emissions.
I think we talk a lot about technological solutions. I like to think about these lower technological solutions, these strong traditional solutions. Like it doesn't sound not labor intensive to process the wild rice,
It
but
is
it
labor
also
intensive.
sounds like, do people experience it as like drudgery? It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like
No,
it's
it's you're out in nature and you're on the water and the water's beautiful and you're hearing the birds and you're seeing birds and there's fish and you've got community members out there, so you're in community. Like there's a lot of people that like to rice. Everybody likes to rice that's done it. White people like to rice, native people like to rice, and in Minnesota you can be a non-native person and go out and get a ricing license and go out and rice. um, I was reading something that some people harvest it to make money, and that's okay if we've got abundance, and some people make like 50, $60,000 a season, and the amount of food that is produced by native ricers supplements diets to the tone of like $250,000 to $300,000 in certain communities. Like they save that
awesome.
much money by going out and ricing their own rice, and it's a healthy food.
It's a healthy food. I like thinking about it in terms of carbon footprint. We're talking about very low footprints, talking about good nutritional balance in the food, and thinking about ways where you can earn money that aren't like injurious to the earth is also really important.
Yeah, yeah, you can earn money doing that. If we can restore a lot more beds, there's people that can go out and earn some living. I think that it could be a win-win for a lot of situations.
There's
You're out
a
in the middle of
lot.
you're out in the middle of nowhere, and in rural areas there's not a lot of economic opportunities for people, and if we can restore more of these areas, we could produce that as well.
Well, you hear about people wanting to set up mining operations in northern Minnesota. Yeah, It's like that's a purely extractive, it will destroy a lot of these pristine waters. Thinking about this regenerative way to restore Manoomin beds to areas where they used to be. This is one of the many indigenous cultural keystone foods that was targeted for destruction as part of the genocide. If we can build that back up, think about the potential for a regenerative economy and lifeway in the north instead of an extractive mining lifeway in the north.
Yeah, mining isn't everything. Those mining companies come in, they hire a few local people, and then they leave their mess for somebody else to deal with. And I don't think people remember that for some reason. Like they say, oh, it's the jobs, it's the jobs. The jobs don't last that long. And then they leave you with the mess. With Manoomin, it keeps coming back every year if you take care of those waters. And there's you can still drink the water.
It's like not an insignificant
I don't
concern,
understand.
right?
I just don't understand. We gotta have water no matter what. Everything on Earth, including humans, need clean water.
In the upper Midwest, we have some areas around Minneapolis that have the bad PFAS contamination. But much of the upper Midwest, the climate outlook is not as terrifying as it could be, and our water is not as polluted as some parts of the US. It's very important to maintain our potential here. And I'm so grateful for the work that you and your community are doing to help teach about this traditional lifeway and to do the work to put the seed in. I was reading up about it and I read that the seeds can take 7 years to germinate.
Yeah, they have to have perfect conditions. And I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it too. If it doesn't germinate 1 year, it doesn't mean it's dead. It just means the conditions aren't right. So it could still be sleeping under there, waiting for the right conditions.
I love that long hope as part of it. And I feel like that long hope, that persistence of hope and potential is really a beautiful emotional energy that hopefully we can take as we think about what restoration efforts could mean, the kind of abundance that is the legacy of this land and what it could mean if we think differently going forward. I really appreciate this time with you and thank you for helping us to learn about this.
Yeah, you're welcome. I have one other thing I wanted to say. Um,
Yeah,
they, I don't know if you've seen cultivated wild rice. Have you ever
I've
seen
seen
that
there's
before?
a difference and
Yes,
that
that was genetically modified so that it could be mechanically extracted from a lake. I do not recommend doing anything with cultivated wild rice or trying to support cultivated wild rice because that is not our rice. That is not native. That is a genetically modified organism that is actually harmful to our ricing beds. In fact, I was reading something that said that whoever owns the patent, that they go around wild rice beds and make sure that it's not their rice. Otherwise, they will take over the bed and say it's their patented rice.
I did not know about this. When I buy it, I try to always buy from tribal nations. There's some
That's
of
the
them
way to
who
do it. That is the way to do it. Or a local person that says that they hand harvested. The difference, the main difference, the way you can find it is one will say cultivated and one will say hand harvested. Because natural wild rice cannot be cultivated. It will kill it, it will destroy the plant, and they just can't use a combine on it or whatever the mechanical stuff they use on it. It'll kill it. And it'll destroy it before you can eat it.
thinking about what you've said about that wild rice it ripens not all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps it to become food for all these other living organisms. This cultivated wild rice, where it's becoming all ripe at the same time, it really changes the nature of how it would interact with all the non-human organisms too.
Well, and then you're taking a machine out there instead of a boat and using care whenever you're using the boat. and you're just taking a little bit at a time rather than the whole amount. They probably rip the stalk right out of the water. I mean, it probably
Yeah.
completely destroys everything. Whereas the hand harvested stuff is done with love and care and respect.
Well, it's the difference between sustainable and not sustainable.
Exactly. And the cultivated would be causing more carbon emissions as well if you're looking at that aspect of it.
Well, if you need the machinery to get in there, and if you're destroying the potential of a perennial plant, like a perennial crop is the crop we need.
Exactly.
That's so important. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's something that most people don't think about because they aren't involved in the processes. So then you don't know what you don't know.
I had known there was a difference, but I didn't know how profound and that it's really like a Lifeway destroying difference. I'm
Yeah.
glad for this opportunity to connect and for your teaching.
Well, thank you for asking me to come here.
Well, we're all really grateful for the work of your community. Thanks for accepting the June Community Resilience Award.
Thank you.
Folks, I want to say miigwech, not just to Amber, but to the many individuals, tribal nations, and organizations for their work nurturing, restoring, and protecting Manoomin and the Manoomin Lifeway. I especially want to recognize the 1854 Treaty Authority and the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. I've used some photographs from the GLIFWC in this video. You will find links to some great educational resources they have created in the video description. I also want to thank everyone in the AR community for your contributions that are keeping this nonprofit rolling. If you are moved by this content and want to see more like it, please donate to refill the community award pool. There's a special donation link pinned as the top comment to this video. We were able to distribute the maximum award of $500 to Amber for her work doing, teaching, and advocating for Manoomin and Manoomin Lifeway restoration. Any overflow of the donation pool this month will go into her hands to be stewarded for her community. I'm very grateful to our donors, to our volunteers, to everyone spreading the word online, and especially to everyone doing the work on the ground. Thanks for getting ready with me, and talk with you again soon.